This waiter laughed at a man sitting alone in a luxury restaurant. He mocked his clothes. He questioned his money. He humiliated him in front of everyone. But what the waiter didn't know was this. The quiet man didn't come to eat. He came to watch. And before the night ended, that waiter discovered the man he insulted owned the entire restaurant. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Now, let's dive into what really happened. Nobody in that luxury restaurant had the slightest idea that their quiet evening was about to turn into a story people would talk about for years. The restaurant glowed with elegance. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, spreading warm, soft light across polished marble floors. Gentle music floated in the air while well-dressed guests enjoyed expensive meals, their low laughter blending with the clinking of fine glassware. Outside the tall glass doors, rows of luxury cars stood proudly, symbols of wealth and status. Everything about the place whispered power, money, and exclusivity. Then the doors opened. A man stepped inside, unnoticed at first. He wore simple black clothes, clean but modest shoes, and nothing about him demanded attention. There were no bodyguards walking behind him, no flashing jewelry on his hands, and no designer labels screaming for recognition. His face was calm, his posture relaxed, and his eyes quietly observant. That man was Keanu Reeves. Yet on this night, he wasn't there as a Hollywood icon. He didn't arrive as a celebrity expecting special treatment or recognition. There were no cameras, no whispers of fame, and no fans rushing toward him. He came alone, choosing silence over spotlight, humility over hype. Without drawing attention, Keanu walked toward a small corner table. He sat down slowly, placed his hands gently on the table, and looked around the restaurant as if he was seeing it for the first time. To everyone else, he appeared to be just another customer. Perhaps someone out of place, perhaps someone who didn't belong among the elite crowd dining that evening. What no one in the room knew was the truth hidden behind his calm presence. Years earlier, Keanu Reeves had quietly invested in the restaurant. He believed in creating a space where people could be treated with dignity, regardless of their background. He never put his name on the walls, never claimed ownership publicly, and never used the restaurant to show off wealth. His identity as the owner remained a carefully kept secret, known only to a few at the highest level of management. That night, Keanu wasn't there to eat a fancy meal. He was there to observe, to watch, to see how people were treated when no one thought power was sitting at the table. And somewhere across the room, a waiter glanced in his direction, already forming judgments based on appearances. Without knowing it, that waiter was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. The waiter assigned to Keanu's table had been having a long, exhausting night. He was young, overwhelmed, and constantly under pressure to impress wealthy customers. All evening, he had been running from table to table, serving people who measured respect by price tags and tipped based on appearances. Some guests snapped their fingers at him, others spoke to him like he was invisible, but he endured it, believing this was the cost of working in a luxury restaurant. When the waiter finally noticed Keanu sitting quietly in the corner, his attitude shifted instantly. He slowed his steps and scanned the man from head to toe. Simple black clothes. No designer logos. No expensive watch shining on his wrist. No signs of wealth that the waiter had learned to recognize and respect. The way Keanu sat, calm, unbothered, and alone, only strengthened the waiter's assumptions. With a frustrated sigh, the waiter walked over to the table. "Sir," he said in a cold, dismissive tone, "this is a luxury restaurant. Are you sure you can afford to eat here?" The words were sharp, cutting through the peaceful atmosphere like a blade. A few nearby guests turned their heads, curious to see how the man would react. Keanu slowly looked up. For a brief moment, surprise crossed his face, not anger, not embarrassment, just quiet disbelief. But he quickly composed himself. His voice remained steady and respectful. "Yes," he replied gently. "I'd like to see the menu." The waiter didn't hide his irritation. He rolled his eyes dramatically, as if dealing with someone wasting his time. "Just so you know," he added, raising his voice slightly so others could hear, "we don't offer discounts here. And our prices aren't cheap. Maybe there's a cafe down the street that fits your budget better. A few guests let out soft laughs, amused by the humiliation. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing that something about this moment felt wrong. The air around the table grew tense, heavy with judgment and arrogance. Keanu didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He didn't remind anyone of who he was. Instead, he smiled calmly. It wasn't a smile of weakness, it was a smile of patience. A smile that carried understanding, restraint, and quiet confidence. Keanu simply nodded and waited, allowing the waiter's words to hang in the air. In that silence, something powerful was building. The waiter believed he was in control of the situation, unaware that his disrespect was being carefully observed. He had no idea that this single moment, this careless insult, was about to change everything. Keanu glanced over the menu and chose the simplest dish, something modest that barely stood out among the expensive options listed. When the waiter returned to take his order, Keanu spoke politely and even thanked him, his tone calm and respectful. There was no hint of complaint in his voice, no sign that the earlier insult had affected him. But the service that followed was anything but professional. The waiter returned late, placing the plate on the table with little care. The food was lukewarm, the presentation sloppy, and the attitude unmistakably disrespectful. He didn't ask if everything was okay. He didn't offer a refill or a smile. Instead, he walked away as if Keanu were an inconvenience rather than a paying guest. Despite this, Keanu said nothing. He took a bite, calmly set his fork down, and continued eating in silence. Each time the waiter passed by the table, he avoided eye contact, occasionally letting out small gestures of irritation. When Keanu quietly asked for water, it came much later than expected. When he said thank you, the words were met with indifference. A woman seated at a nearby table leaned toward her companion and whispered, "Why is he letting this happen?" The question lingered in the air. Keanu wasn't angry. His face showed no frustration, no resentment. Instead, his eyes carefully observed everything: the tone of service, the behavior of the staff, and the reactions of the guests around him. To Keanu, this wasn't just a meal. It was a moment of truth, a reflection of how people were treated when no one thought power was watching. When he finished eating, Keanu gently placed his napkin on the table. He sat back, took a slow breath, and looked up as the waiter passed by once more. "Could you please call the manager?" Keanu asked softly. The waiter stopped and turned, a smug smile spreading across his face. "Oh, now you want the manager," he said sarcastically. "Good luck." He walked away, clearly amused, convinced that nothing serious would come from the request. But moments later, the atmosphere shifted. The restaurant manager hurried toward the table, his steps quick and nervous. The instant his eyes landed on Keanu, all the color drained from his face. His confident posture collapsed into shock and disbelief. "Sir." The manager stuttered, struggling to find his words. Keanu gently raised his hand, signaling him to stop. "Please," he said calmly. "Let's talk privately." The manager nodded instantly. Around them, conversations faded. Forks paused mid-air. The soft music seemed to disappear. The entire restaurant fell into silence, unaware that the storm they were about to witness had already begun. Minutes passed in tense silence. The entire restaurant seemed frozen, as if time itself had slowed. Finally, the manager returned, his face pale and his hands shaking slightly. Every step he took was careful, almost hesitant, as if he feared making another mistake in front of the guests. When he reached Keanu's table, he paused, straightened his posture, and took a deep breath. Then, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I owe an apology. This man is not just a guest. He is the owner of this restaurant." A collective gasp filled the room. Conversations abruptly stopped. Forks hovered in midair, glasses clinked softly, and all eyes turned toward the corner table. Shock rippled across the restaurant like a sudden wave. The young waiter froze instantly, as if the floor had opened beneath him. His jaw tightened, his hands shook slightly, and all the arrogance that had carried him moments ago vanished in an instant. He could not comprehend what he had just heard. The man he had belittled, mocked, and underestimated the one he assumed was beneath him, was the very person who owned the entire establishment. Keanu stood up slowly, his movements calm and deliberate. He looked around the room, his gaze steady yet kind. "I didn't come here to be treated like a celebrity," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I came to see how people are treated when no one thinks they matter." The room remained silent. Every guest felt the weight of his words. People shifted in their seats, some looking embarrassed, others quietly reflecting on their own judgments. Keanu turned toward the waiter, who now stood motionless, his pride crushed. "You judged me by my clothes," Keanu continued, his voice gentle but carrying authority. "But character doesn't wear a brand. Respect is not earned by appearances or wealth, it is owed to everyone." The waiter's hands trembled as he lowered his gaze, words caught in his throat. After a long pause, he whispered, I'm sorry." Keanu nodded, a small, forgiving smile appearing on his face. "Everyone deserves respect," he said. "Especially when you think they have none." The lesson landed hard. The room, once filled with luxury and arrogance, now felt humbled. It was a reminder that appearances can deceive, arrogance can blind, and the quietest person in the room may hold the greatest power. In that moment, Keanu didn't just reveal himself as the owner, he revealed a truth far more valuable. Human decency always matters more than judgment or pride. The waiter, the guests, even the staff, left that table with a memory they would never forget. A lesson in humility, respect, and the true meaning of character. After the shocking revelation, the restaurant remained silent. Guests exchanged glances, some still struggling to process what had just happened. The waiter, frozen in place moments before, now stood with his hands trembling, shame washing over him like a cold wave. He expected punishment, perhaps even to be fired on the spot. But Keanu Reeves had other plans. Instead of anger or retaliation, Keanu smiled gently and gestured to the young man. "Please, sit," he said calmly. The waiter hesitated, then obeyed, unsure of what was coming next. "I was once treated the same way," Keanu began, his voice steady, sincere, and full of warmth. "Not because I was poor or undeserving, but because people didn't know who I was. They judged me by what they could see, my appearance, my clothes, my lack of status at the time. And I understand that feeling." The waiter listened intently, his shame slowly transforming into a mix of awe and understanding. Keanu continued, "This restaurant is meant to be a place of dignity, respect, and care. It is not about wealth, fashion, or social status. Everyone who walks through these doors should feel valued, no matter who they are or what they wear." Then, in a gesture that caught everyone's attention, Keanu announced that the waiter would be given a second chance. He would receive proper training, supervision, and guidance, but only if he committed to treating all guests with respect and kindness. It wasn't just about rules, it was about character, about understanding the weight of one's actions. Before leaving the restaurant, Keanu quietly paid for every meal that night, ensuring that no guest felt uneasy or embarrassed. He walked toward the exit with his usual calm, humble demeanor. As he passed, people stood in silence, some ashamed, realizing how quick they were to judge, others inspired, witnessing the grace, patience, and humility of a man who could have reacted with anger but chose compassion instead. The lesson was undeniable and clear: never judge someone by appearance. Respect costs nothing, yet it is priceless. Kindness and humility reveal true wealth. Because sometimes, the quiet man in the corner, the one who seems ordinary or unnoticed, is the one who holds the greatest power in the room. And in that moment, every person in that restaurant learned a life-changing truth about respect, human decency, and the profound impact of a single act of kindness. The night ended not with humiliation or punishment, but with reflection, inspiration, and a lesson that would stay with everyone forever.